My daughter-in-law looked me straight in the eye across the Christmas table and said, "You're the most useless woman ever." Everyone froze. My son stared down at his plate, pretending not to hear. My hands shook, but my voice didn't. I said, "Then stop calling me when you need money." That should have been the end of it, but it wasn't. 10 minutes later, she was crying in front of my grandchildren, making me look like a monster. By the time I left their house, she'd already called the police and told them I'd threatened her. I'm 67 years old. I've raised a son, buried a husband, and spent my life trying to hold this family together. But that Christmas, I learned something. When someone pushes you far enough, even a quiet woman like me can fight back. And I did. I'm 67, and I live alone in a small house near the harbor in Portland, Maine. The house isn't much, but it's quiet. I retired from teaching art a few years ago, and my days are mostly the same. I wake up early, feed my cat Maple, make coffee, and watch the boats move slowly through the fog. I draw sometimes, but not as much as I used to. Most evenings, I sit by the window and listen to the radio. It's a simple life, and for the most part, I'm used to the silence. The hardest part is the holidays. For the past 2 Christmases, I've had dinner by myself. My son Lucas always had some reason. One year, he said they were traveling. The next year, he said they wanted a small gathering at home. I said I understood, but that didn't make the house feel any less empty. I remember setting a plate for myself, turning on the television for company, and pretending it didn't matter. I watched families on the screen laughing and arguing, and I thought maybe that was enough for me, just to see it, even if it wasn't mine anymore. Then, this year, the phone rang. It wasn't Lucas, it was Jenna, my daughter-in-law. Her voice was cheerful, maybe too cheerful. She said, "You should come this Christmas, the kids miss you." I didn't know what to say right away. Jenna isn't the type to invite me to much. I could hear noise in the background, music, laughter, dishes clattering, and I wondered if she'd practiced the tone before calling. Still, I told her yes. It had been a long time since anyone asked. After I hung up, I sat at the kitchen table for a while. Maple jumped onto the chair next to me and stayed there, as if waiting for me to speak. I said out loud, "Looks like we're going out for Christmas." I laughed a little, but my chest felt tight. That night, I went to the cabinet and took out my old recipe box. It's filled with cards written in my mother's handwriting, yellowed from age. I picked out the one for her honey pecan pie. It's the dessert I always make for family gatherings. I've been making it since Lucas was a boy, and it's the same one his kids love. I wanted to bring something familiar, something that felt like me. I spent the next morning baking. I set the butter out early to soften, and I roasted the pecans until the kitchen smelled sweet and nutty. I followed the recipe the way I always do, reading each line twice, even though I could do it with my eyes closed. When I poured the filling into the crust, I thought about the first time I made it for Lucas when he was 10. He'd helped me crack the nuts, dropping half of them on the floor. He said it was the best pie in the world. I wondered if he even remembered that. When the pie came out of the oven, I let it cool on the counter while I cleaned up. I wrapped it carefully in a clean kitchen towel the same way my mother used to do. I placed it in the old metal tin with the latch that sticks unless you press the side first. I checked it twice, to make sure it was secure. I wanted it to arrive looking perfect. By the time I finished, the afternoon light was fading. The sky outside was gray and heavy, and the first flakes of snow started to fall. I put on my coat, grabbed the pie, and stood by the door for a minute. I thought about calling Lucas just to make sure Jenna really wanted me there. But I didn't. I didn't want to give her a chance to change her mind. The drive to their house takes about 40 minutes. I went the long way, along the coast road, where you can see the water between the trees. Christmas lights hung from nearly every house, small yellow ones that flickered against the snow. I kept one hand on the steering wheel and one steadying the pie on the seat beside me. The car heater hummed, and for the first time in a while, I let myself feel hopeful. When I got close, I slowed down. Their neighborhood was one of those new developments where every house looks similar. Big windows, perfect lawns, and matching wreaths on the doors. I parked across the street and turned off the engine. I could see their living room from where I sat. The tree was lit up, the windows glowing. It looked warm, full of life, everything a family Christmas should be. I sat there for a few minutes, just watching. I thought about how much time had passed since I'd been part of their celebrations. I thought about how, for years, I'd kept trying to fit into their lives, even when it felt like there wasn't much room for me anymore. I told myself that tonight would be different. Maybe Jenna had changed. Maybe she meant what she said. I took a deep breath, picked up the pie, and stepped out of the car. The cold air stung my face, and the snow crunched under my shoes. I walked slowly up the driveway, feeling the weight of the tin in my hands. My heart was beating faster than it should have been. I told myself it was just excitement, but deep down, I knew it was something else. When I reached the door, I stopped for a second to straighten my scarf. I could hear laughter inside and someone, probably Jenna, telling the kids to behave. I smiled to myself, trying to shake the nerves. I wasn't there to argue. I just wanted to see my family, eat dinner, and be part of things again. I rang the doorbell, and a few seconds later, I saw Jenna's shadow through the glass. The door opened, and there she was, smiling, polite and distant, the way people smile when they don't really mean it. "Hi, Helen," she said, stepping aside. "So glad you could make it." I stepped in, holding the pie close so it wouldn't drop. The warmth from the house hit my face. It smelled like cinnamon and pine. The kids came running from the living room, shouting "Grandma," and wrapping their arms around me. For a moment, everything felt right again. I looked over at Jenna, who was watching us carefully, and I felt something in my stomach tighten. I told myself I was imagining it, that I was just nervous. I smiled, hugged the kids again, and said, "I brought the pie." I didn't know then that the pie I made with so much love would become the reason everything fell apart later that night. When I got to Lucas's house, I stood there for a second before ringing the bell. The lights were perfect, every window glowing, the porch clean like no one ever actually used it. It looked like one of those houses you see on holiday cards. Jenna opened the door. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Helen, it's so nice that you could come." Her voice was polite, careful. Then Lucas appeared behind her and gave me a hug. "Hey, Mom, I'm glad you made it." That warmth in his voice was the only thing that made me relax a little. Before I could even take off my coat, Noah came running. 16 and taller than me now, but still my boy's boy. "Grandma," he said, grabbing me like he used to when he was little. I laughed and hugged him back. Sophie followed, shy and quiet as always. "Hi, Grandma," she said softly. I kissed her cheek. "You've grown so much, sweetheart." Inside, everything looked like it belonged in a magazine. The table was already set, candles lit, not a single thing out of place. It should have felt warm, but it didn't. Everything looked perfect, but somehow cold, like it was all for show. We sat down, and Lucas started talking about work. I nodded, pretending to listen, but my eyes kept going to the kids. Noah showed me a picture from his basketball game. "Look, Grandma, that's when I scored." He sounded proud, and I felt proud too. "You're doing great," I told him. "You've got your father's energy." Then Sophie showed me one of her drawings. It was simple, but I loved it. "That's beautiful," I said. "You've got real talent." Before Sophie could say anything, Jenna spoke up. "Sophie got her love of art from me, I think." Her tone was light, but the way she said it made me pause. I smiled and nodded, even though Sophie used to spend hours drawing with me when she was small. Dinner went on quietly. The food was good, the conversation wasn't. I could feel the effort in every word. Lucas tried to keep things light, the kids filled the silence now and then, and Jenna watched everything like she was making sure it went according to plan. When it was time for dessert, I decided to bring out the pie. I'd kept it in the kitchen, safe in its old tin. I opened it and placed it on the table. "I made the pecan pie," I said softly. Noah's face lit up immediately. "Grandma's pie. You made it." He said it loud, his excitement real and sweet. That one moment felt like Christmas used to feel. But then I looked up and saw Jenna. She was still smiling, but her jaw tightened. Her eyes went straight to the pie. "Oh, that's very nice, Helen," she said. "We already have plenty of dessert, but sure, we can make room." The room got quiet for a second. Lucas said something about how we could have both, trying to smooth things over. I smiled, pretending not to notice, but I felt it. That pie wasn't just dessert to her. It was a reminder of where I still belonged. I glanced around the room. Everything in that house was hers. The decorations, the smell, even the way the kids looked at her for permission before speaking. And that pie, the one I'd made for years, didn't fit her picture. She looked at it like it was something she hadn't planned for, something she didn't want sitting on her perfect table. And in that moment, I understood it wasn't just about the pie. To her, I wasn't family. I was someone who kept showing up, holding on to traditions she was trying to erase. Her smile stayed on, but her eyes told the truth. That pie had crossed a line, and I knew right then something was going to happen. Something small maybe, but enough to change everything. After dinner, I stood up to help clear the table. It's what I've always done, habits from years of hosting, years of being the one who keeps things moving. Jenna stayed in her seat, giving quick instruction to Sophie about where to put the dishes. Lucas was laughing with Noah about something at school, and for a short moment the house sounded normal again. I took the plates to the kitchen and started tidying up. The smell of roasted turkey and candles mixed in the air. I looked around for the pie tin. It wasn't on the counter. I checked the stove, the fridge, the pantry. Nothing. "Where's the pie?" I asked, keeping my voice calm. Jenna didn't even look up right away. She was fixing the arrangement of desserts on a large glass tray. Store-bought cake, tarts, and chocolate-covered strawberries. After a few seconds, she said lightly, "Oh, I put it away. We already have enough desserts, Helen. I wanted to keep things modern this year." For a second, I didn't understand what she meant. Then it hit me. She'd taken it and hidden it. "But it's Noah's favorite," I said quietly. Jenna smiled, still adjusting a plate of cookies. "People's tastes change," she said, like it was nothing. I stood there frozen for a moment, my hand still on a dish towel. The kitchen was warm, but I felt cold. There wasn't anger at first, just that familiar feeling of being quietly dismissed. Like my effort, my place, my traditions didn't mean anything here. I looked at her face. She didn't look mean, she just looked satisfied, like she'd finished arranging things exactly the way she wanted. The pie didn't fit into her picture of Christmas, and maybe neither did I. I wanted to say something sharp, but the kids were still laughing in the dining room, and Lucas looked relaxed for once. I swallowed the words and wiped my hands on the towel instead. The only sound in the kitchen was the soft ticking of the oven cooling down. When Jenna finally turned to face me, she tilted her head a little. "Everything okay?" she asked, as if I were the one overreacting. I nodded. "Of course, everything's fine." But it wasn't. It hadn't been for a long time. When I walked back to the dining room, the table looked beautiful again. Candles flickering, plates replaced with clean ones, everyone pretending this was a perfect Christmas. I took my seat at the end of the table, across from Jenna. The silverware glowed under the candlelight, and for some reason I couldn't stop staring at the reflection of her face in the knife. Calm, composed, untouchable. Lucas raised his glass and said something about family, about how good it was to be together. I smiled when he looked my way, but my chest felt tight. I couldn't taste the food anymore. I just kept thinking about the pie, sitting somewhere in the pantry, untouched, like it was something to be embarrassed about. Noah leaned toward me halfway through the meal. "Grandma," he whispered, "are we going to have your pie later?" I smiled and brushed his hand. "We'll see, sweetheart." But I already knew the answer. Across the table, Jenna caught my eye. There was a flicker of something there. Not guilt, not even annoyance. It was control. The kind that comes from knowing you've won a quiet battle no one else noticed. I forced myself to look away. I told myself to focus on the kids, on the sounds of forks against plates, on Lucas's voice filling the silence I couldn't break. I tried to remind myself that it was Christmas, that this wasn't the moment to fight over a pie. But it wasn't really about the pie. It was about years of small cuts, little things said and done to make me smaller, quieter, easier to ignore. The more I sat there, the more I could feel the weight of all of it pressing down. Every time Jenna laughed, every time she reached to refill a glass, I could feel something inside me stretch thin. The candles flickered, the house was warm and full of light, but all I could feel was the distance between us, between what I thought family meant and what it had become. When dinner finally ended, I looked at my reflection in the window. Behind me was the table, the perfect family, the perfect house. But the woman in the glass didn't look like she belonged there. I had no idea then that just a few hours later, Jenna would turn that same Christmas night into a police report, and my name would be the one written on it. After dinner, I offered to help with the dishes. Jenna didn't argue. She handed me a towel and turned back to the sink. For a while, it was quiet, just the sound of running water, forks clinking in the soapy basin, the hum of the dishwasher in the corner. Then she spoke. Her voice was calm, almost too calm. "You know, Helen," she said, "you always have to interfere." I froze, holding a wet plate in my hands. "What do you mean?" She didn't look at me. "You can't help yourself. You show up, you make comments, you fix things that aren't broken." She turned off the faucet and looked over her shoulder. "You give money to control people." I felt the words hit me like small stones. "That's not fair," I said quietly. "I give because I love." Jenna turned, drying her hands on a towel. "No," she said. "You give because you need to feel needed." For a second, I couldn't speak. I wanted to laugh it off, say she was overreacting, but she wasn't smiling. Her face was steady, serious. She stepped closer. You rearranged our pantry last month. You called Noah's school behind my back. You told his counselor he needed more structure. You don't even realize how much you crossed the line. My mouth opened, but nothing came out. I remembered the pantry. I had only helped put away groceries. And I had called the school because Noah had mentioned struggling with his homework. I thought I was helping. Jenna went on, her tone sharp but low, almost whispering. Every time you step in, you make me feel like I'm not good enough, like I'm just filling in until you decide to take over again. That's not true, I said, my voice shaking. I've never wanted to take anything from you. I just want to help. She crossed her arms. You don't see it, do you? You can't stand not being in control. You pay for things so you can stay involved. The summer camp, the mortgage last year, the new laptop for Noah. You make it look generous, but it's really about keeping us tied to you. Her words hit something deep. My first instinct was to defend myself, to say it wasn't like that. But as she listed each thing, I could see them clearly. The moments I'd written checks, made transfers, said, don't worry about it. I remembered how good it made me feel to help, how it brought me closer to them for a little while. I turned back to the sink, pretending to rinse a glass just to have something to do with my hands. The faucet hissed. The kettle on the stove began to whistle softly. The kitchen felt smaller, tighter. I don't keep score, I said finally. I've never asked for anything back. You don't have to, Jenna said. The reminder is always there. The way you talk about sacrifice, the way you look at us when we say no to your offers. You keep track, even if you don't say it out loud. I wanted to tell her she was wrong, but deep down, I wasn't sure she was. I thought about all the times I'd mentioned the money, not to guilt anyone, but maybe to be noticed, to remind them I was still part of their lives. I thought about how I'd felt when my help wasn't appreciated. I told myself it came from love, but maybe some part of me also wanted to feel needed again. The whistle of the kettle grew louder. Jenna didn't move to stop it. I reached over and turned off the burner. The silence that followed was heavy, almost suffocating. She looked at me and said softly, "We don't need you to fix things for us anymore." It wasn't cruel, but it was final. I nodded slowly, more to myself than to her. "I see," I said. My voice was calm, but something inside me was breaking. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The only sound was the slow drip of water from a plate I'd forgotten to dry. I thought about all those years, the times I'd stayed up late helping Lucas fill out college forms, the days I'd babysat the kids so they could work, the quiet pride I'd felt writing checks when they were struggling. I thought those things meant love. Maybe to Jenna, they meant something else entirely. Control, obligation, a debt that never stopped growing. I finally sat down at the small kitchen table. My hands were still damp from the sink. I stared at them, at the lines, the small cuts, the wrinkles from years of washing and cooking and caring. Jenna went back to the counter, moving things around as if the conversation hadn't happened. I realized then that it wasn't just her who had built this distance. I had helped build it too. I'd filled every empty space with favors and help, thinking that's what mothers do to stay close. But all I had done was buy my way in. And now, even that wasn't wanted. I didn't say another word. I just sat there, listening to the faint sound of the kettle cooling down, the slow clicking of the oven as it turned off. And in that quiet, something shifted in me. It wasn't anger, not yet. It was understanding. Maybe I hadn't been taken advantage of. Maybe I had allowed it, hoping that my love, my help, my money would be enough to keep me from being left out. But love given out of fear isn't love at all. That night, in that perfect kitchen, surrounded by all the things I'd helped pay for, I finally understood the truth. I hadn't been pushed out of their lives. I had handed them the door myself. When we went back to the table, everything looked the same. Candles glowing, plates replaced, the smell of cinnamon and turkey still in the air. But the room felt different. I could feel it in the way Jenna looked at me when I sat down. Her face was calm, but her eyes had gone cold. Everyone was trying to act normal. Lucas was talking about something at work. Noah was showing Sophie a video on his phone, and Jenna was smiling just enough to look polite. I tried to match the mood, to pretend I didn't feel the chill between us. But underneath all that laughter and small talk, I could sense it, that tight, invisible tension that comes before something breaks. When the plates were cleared, Jenna stood up and brought out the dessert tray. Chocolate cake, pumpkin pie, cookies arranged perfectly in a circle. She set it down in the center of the table, her movements graceful, practiced. "Grandma didn't bring pie this year, honey," she said suddenly, her voice light, like it was just another part of the conversation. For a second, no one reacted. Then Noah looked up, confused. "Yes, she did. I saw it in the pantry," he said. His voice wasn't angry, just sure. The whole table went silent. I could hear the clock ticking in the living room. Sophie froze, looking between her mother and me. Lucas blinked, not sure what to say. Jenna smiled tighter. "Noah," she said softly, "sit down. We're having what's on the table." Her tone wasn't loud, but it carried something sharp underneath, the kind of tone that doesn't invite questions. Noah looked down, embarrassed. "But—" "Sit down," she repeated, this time firmer. I wanted to speak, to tell the truth, to say, "Yes, I brought the pie. It's his favorite," but I couldn't. The words caught in my throat, so I just sat there, staring at the table, at the reflection of the candlelight on the silver forks. My hands were tight in my lap. I could feel my heart beating in my chest, slow and heavy. Lucas gave a small laugh, the kind people give when they're trying to fix something without making it worse. "We'll have it later," he said. "Maybe as a midnight snack." He looked at Jenna like he was asking for permission. She didn't look back at him. No one said anything after that. We all just started eating the cake. It tasted fine, sweet enough, but every bite felt heavy. Noah barely touched his plate. Sophie kept glancing at me, her face caught between confusion and guilt. I smiled at her, the best I could, to tell her it was okay. The sound of forks on plates was the only thing left. The room was quiet, too quiet. Even the Christmas music playing in the background felt like it belonged to someone else's house. I looked at Jenna across the table. Her smile was back, wide, flawless, and empty. She laughed at something Lucas said, even reached to touch his arm, but her eyes kept finding mine. And every time they did, I felt the same thing. The warning, the message, stay in your place. In that moment, I realized I'd spent years trying to keep peace by staying silent. I'd let things slide, told myself it wasn't worth the trouble, believed that kindness would eventually be recognized for what it was. But sitting there, watching my grandson lower his head because his mother told him to forget the truth, something inside me shifted. I looked around the table, at Lucas pretending not to notice, at Sophie pretending not to understand, at Jenna pretending to be the perfect hostess. It was all an act. Every word, every smile, every piece of this evening was a performance, and I was the extra who didn't belong in the scene anymore. For a few seconds I thought about standing up, walking to the pantry, and bringing that pie out myself. I imagined setting it on the table, cutting a slice, and telling the truth right in front of everyone. But I didn't, because I realized something. Silence protects the wrong people. I looked down at my hands and stayed quiet, not because I was afraid of Jenna, but because I was ashamed of how many times I'd let her rewrite moments like this. The kids finished their dessert. Lucas tried to change the subject. Jenna leaned back in her chair, satisfied. The candles burned lower. It was just another family dinner on the outside, but inside something had cracked. Something small, but deep. Later that night, when I'd be sitting alone in my car, that moment would replay in my head over and over. Noah's voice, Jenna's smile, my silence. And I would finally understand that it wasn't just a pie she'd hidden. It was me. After dinner, the kids went upstairs, and Lucas disappeared into the garage to check on something. It was just the two of us left, me and Jenna. The house felt too quiet without the sound of their voices. I started stacking the plates to wash them, trying to make myself useful, but before I could move, Jenna said, "Leave it, I'll take care of it." I turned to her, surprised. She was standing by the counter, her arms crossed, her face calm but tense. For a few seconds, neither of us said anything. I thought maybe we were done for the night, that we could just keep things polite until I left. Then she spoke again, and this time her tone was different. "This is my home, Helen," she said slowly. "My family? My rules?" Her words hung in the air, sharp and steady. I looked at her, trying to understand what she wanted from me. "I never said it wasn't," I replied quietly, "but I'm still Lucas's mother. I'm still their grandmother." She laughed softly, shaking her head. "You just don't get it, do you? You think because you're older, because you've helped us, that you still get a say. But this, all of this," she gestured around the kitchen, "this is mine now. You've had your time." I felt something twist inside me. "You can't erase me from their lives," I said. That made her smile, but it wasn't kind. "Erase you?" she said. "Helen, who would even notice if you were gone?" For a moment I couldn't breathe. The way she said it, calm, certain, It was like she'd been waiting to say those words for a long time. The light above the stove was the only one left on. It cast a dull yellow glow across the room, enough to see her face clearly. Her eyes weren't angry. They were steady, like she'd already decided I didn't matter anymore. I set the dish towel down on the counter. "You think you can push me out and maybe you can?" I said, keeping my voice steady, "but you don't get to decide who I am, or what I mean to them." She took a small step closer. "You really think this family would fall apart without you?" "No," I said. "I think it already has." That made her blink. Just for a second, something flickered in her eyes, a mix of surprise and maybe fear, but she recovered fast. "You're just bitter," she said. "You can't handle not being the center of attention anymore?" I let out a breath, slow and even. "If all you want from me is money," I said, "let's call it what it is, business. No more pretending it's family." Her smile froze. "What?" I looked her in the eye. "You've made it clear. My place here depends on what I can give. So let's make it simple. No more checks, no more help. You can manage things your way." For the first time all night, she looked unsure. Her posture straightened, but her hands tightened around the counter. "You're being dramatic," she said quietly. "No," I said. "I'm being honest." The air between us felt heavy. The sound of the wind outside pressed against the windows, the faint whistle of it cutting through the silence. The oven light flickered once, then went out, leaving us in a half-shadow. She stared at me, her lips parted like she wanted to say something, but no words came out. I saw it then. The fear behind her control, the panic behind her smile. It wasn't about me. It was about losing the power she thought she had. I didn't say another word. I turned, walked to the hallway, and picked up my coat from the rack. My hands were steady, but my chest felt tight. As I slipped it on, I saw the old tin sitting by the door, my pecan pie, still untouched. I picked it up. The metal was cold, but it felt good to hold on to something that was still mine. Jenna didn't follow me to the door. She just stood there in the kitchen, her shadow stretching across the floor, silent. When I opened the door, the wind hit my face. Sharp, cold, full of snow. The night had turned completely white outside, flakes swirling under the streetlights. I stepped out, closing the door softly behind me. For a moment I stood there, pie in one hand, the sound of my own breathing mixing with the wind. The house behind me looked perfect, warm, bright, everything in its place, but I knew what was inside. I walked down the steps slowly, the snow crunching under my shoes. My car was parked at the curb, half covered in frost. I brushed the window with my sleeve and set the pie on the passenger seat. Then I just sat there for a minute, watching the lights in their windows flicker through the falling snow. It should have felt like loss, but it didn't. Not yet. It felt like something else, something I couldn't name then, but would understand later. That night I drove away from my son's house, not knowing that I was leaving more than just their home. I was leaving the silence I had built around myself for years, the silence that had kept everyone comfortable but had slowly erased me. And once I broke it, nothing in our family would ever sound the same again. It was close to midnight when the phone rang. At first I thought I was dreaming. The sound kept going, sharp in the quiet of my small house. I reached over and answered, my voice groggy. "Hello?" "Mom," Lucas said, his voice tight, rushed. "Don't panic, but Jenna called the police." For a second I thought I misheard him. "What?" "She told them you threatened her," he said quickly. "She said you made her feel unsafe after dinner." I sat up straight in bed. The room was dark, the only light coming from the street lamp outside. My heart started to pound. "That's not true," I said, but even as the words left my mouth, I realized truth didn't matter anymore. Jenna had made her move. Lucas kept talking, but his voice sounded far away. "They might want to talk to you. Just tell them your side, okay? I'll handle it here." Before I could ask more, there was a knock on my door. Firm, professional, 3 steady knocks. I went to the window and saw a patrol car parked by the curb, red and blue lights flashing softly through the snow. I took a deep breath, pulled on my robe, and opened the door. The woman standing there wasn't what I expected. She was in her late 40s, hair tied neatly back, uniform pressed, eyes calm. "Mrs. Marwood," she said, "I'm Officer Dana Whitmore. I'd like to ask you a few questions about an incident reported earlier tonight." I nodded. "Of course. Please come in." She stepped inside, careful not to track snow on the rug. I offered her tea, mostly out of habit. She smiled politely but declined. She sat at the small table by the window and opened her notebook. Your daughter-in-law, Jenna Rowe, said you made statements tonight that she found threatening, she said. Can you tell me your version of what happened? I stood for a second, unsure where to begin. Then I sat down across from her. We argued, I said simply. She told me this was her house, her family, her rules. I told her if all she wanted from me was money, then we should call it business instead of pretending we were still family. Officer Whitmore nodded, writing as I spoke. Did you raise your voice? No, I said. I've been through enough in my life to know yelling doesn't change much. She kept her tone neutral. Did you make any physical gestures or statements that could be taken as threatening? I told her I wouldn't be giving her any more money, I said. If that's a threat, then I suppose that's what this is about. That made her pause for a second. Money? I got up and walked to the small cabinet near the counter. I took out a folded stack of papers, the list I had made that same night right before Lucas called. I placed it in front of her. These are the records, I said. 5 years of payments, gifts, mortgage help, tuition fees, everything I've given them. She flipped through the pages. Each line was dated and labeled. At the bottom, I had written the total, $64,800. She raised her eyebrows slightly. That's generous. I smiled, but it didn't reach my eyes. No, I said quietly, that's desperate. The sound of her pen scratching on paper filled the silence. She didn't rush me. She asked a few more questions on what time I left, whether anyone else witnessed the argument. Her voice stayed steady, professional, but not unkind. When we finished, she closed her notebook. Mrs. Marwood, she said gently, from what you've told me, it sounds like a misunderstanding. I don't see any reason for concern tonight, but I'd advise you to avoid contact for now. Let things cool off. I nodded. I don't plan on calling them. She gave me a small smile, the kind that comes from seeing too many families tear each other apart over things that used to be love. You seem like a reasonable woman, she said. I'm sorry it came to this. Me too, I said, but I suppose it had to happen sooner or later. She stood, zipped her coat, and headed for the door. Try to get some rest, she said before leaving. You've had a long night. After she left, I stood in the quiet for a while. The house felt smaller than usual. The ticking clock sounded louder. I walked into the bathroom and turned on the light. In the mirror, I saw a woman I barely recognized. Tired eyes, gray hair that had come loose from its clip, face pale from shock. I looked at myself the way I used to look at my students' sketches, searching for what was missing. I whispered, almost without meaning to, I taught children how to draw portraits, and somehow, all this time, I've been painting the wrong people. The words hung in the air, soft but heavy. I turned off the light, walked back to the kitchen, and sat down. The pie tin was still on the counter, untouched. I placed my hand on it, feeling the cool metal under my fingers. It was strange how something as simple as a pie, something made out of love, could turn into the symbol of everything that had gone wrong. Outside, the snow kept falling, covering the street, the car, the world. I sat there until the first gray light of morning began to touch the curtains, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel like crying. Because now I finally understood that silence had cost me more than money ever could, and I wasn't going to be quiet anymore. For a few days after the police visit, I tried to go on as usual, watering the plants, feeding Maple, walking to the corner store for milk I didn't really need. But no matter what I did, I couldn't stop replaying the same thought in my head. How much of my life with Jenna had been real? Every smile, every thank you, every moment she called me Mom, was all of it just part of something she was building? One morning, I decided I needed answers. Not guesses, not feelings, facts. So I put on my coat, tied my scarf, and walked down to the Portland Public Library. The air inside was warm and dry, filled with that smell of paper and old wood. I hadn't been there in years, not since I retired. At the front desk sat a young woman with dark hair tied up in a bun. Her name tag read Annie. She smiled when I approached. "Can I help you find something?" she asked. "I'm trying to look up someone's past records," I said, my voice lower than I meant it to be. "An old name, maybe from before marriage. Do you know where they might have lived?" "Possibly Illinois," I said. "Around 2014. The name was Jennifer Rourke." She typed it into her computer and clicked through a few screens. Her fingers moved fast. "Let me check the archive databases, too. Sometimes older civil cases don't show up right away." I waited, hands folded on the counter. My heart was beating harder than it should have for a simple search. After a few minutes, Annie's eyes narrowed at the screen. "Here," she said softly, turning it toward me. "Is this who you're looking for?" On the monitor was a court filing from Cook County, Illinois, 12/14, the name Jennifer L. Rourke. The accusation, embezzlement and misappropriation of corporate funds. She'd been working at an advertising firm, managing client accounts. The company claimed she'd been stealing money over the course of 8 months. The case was settled out of court, records sealed. Annie looked up at me. "It says the case never went to trial, but she paid restitution and disappeared after that." I nodded slowly. "Disappeared," I repeated. The word felt heavy. "Do you know her?" Annie asked gently. I took a deep breath. "She's my daughter-in-law," I said. Annie didn't say anything for a moment, just watched my face, probably wondering how she was supposed to respond to something like that. "I can print the summary if you'd like." "Yes," I said, "please." As the printer hummed, I stared at the screen again. The lines of text blurred slightly, not from the light but from tears I hadn't realized were there. The year matched. The age matched. The timeline fit perfectly. I remembered the first time I met Jenna, 8 years ago, at a coffee shop in downtown Portland. Lucas had introduced her as someone from Seattle. She'd said her family lived up north, that she'd moved for work, that she'd always wanted to start fresh. It sounded innocent then. Everyone's allowed a new start, but now I saw it for what it really was. The first lie. I remembered how she avoided talking about her past, how she changed the subject whenever I asked about her parents or where she went to college. I used to think she was just private. Now I understood. She wasn't hiding pain. She was hiding herself. I left the library with the printed papers folded neatly in my bag. The sky outside was gray and sharp, the kind of cold that sinks right into your bones. I stood on the steps for a long time, watching cars move down the street, feeling the pieces fall into place. Everything suddenly made sense. The way she controlled every dollar in their household. The way she made Lucas believe they were always under pressure. The way she used my help as a lifeline but treated me like an inconvenience. It wasn't personal. It was calculated. Jenna wasn't just a manipulative woman. She was a professional at it. That night, I sat at my kitchen table with the papers spread out in front of me. The only light came from the desk lamp, glowing faint and yellow. Maple jumped onto the chair beside me and curled up, as if sensing I needed the company. I traced my finger over the name again, Jennifer L. Rourke. Same initials, same timeline, same pattern. And for the first time, I let the truth settle in completely. She hadn't just been trying to erase me. She'd been building a new version of her life, using mine as the foundation. I leaned back in my chair, breathing slowly. The fear I'd felt for days turned into something else. Anger, but not the wild kind. A clean, steady kind. The kind that comes when you finally stop denying what's been right in front of you all along. I thought I had only lost my place in the family. But now, I realized I'd almost lost the family itself, to a woman who lived off lies. I folded the papers, put them in an envelope, and sealed it shut. Tomorrow, I would call Detective Cole. Tonight, I would sleep knowing that the truth, however painful, was finally mine. The next afternoon, I drove to their neighborhood. I told myself I just wanted to see the house, to make sense of everything I'd learned the day before. But deep down, I already knew I was looking for proof. Something my heart had known for years, but my head needed to see. Lucas and Jenna's house looked perfect, like something from a magazine. The lawn trimmed, the porch lined with fresh wreaths, the white siding spotless even after a storm. There were still Christmas lights hanging from the roof, blinking red and gold in the winter daylight. It was the kind of house that made you think the people inside had it all figured out. I parked across the street, far enough not to be noticed. The engine clicked softly as it cooled. For a few minutes, nothing happened. Then a moving truck turned the corner and stopped in front of their house. 2 men got out wearing black jackets with the logo of a high-end furniture store downtown, the kind of store where a single chair costs more than my monthly pension. I watched as they unloaded a new dining table, tall back chairs, and a large sideboard still wrapped in protective film. They carried each piece carefully through the front door, while Jenna stood outside giving instructions on her phone. She was smiling, her voice light, confident. When she turned, I saw her clearly for the first time since that night. Not the trembling woman who'd called the police, but the real one. Calm, radiant, in control. She wore a long beige coat, the kind you see in catalogs, and carried shopping bags from luxury stores. Nordstrom, Anthropology, Lululemon. She looked like someone who'd just spent the morning rewarding herself. I sat there watching, gripping the steering wheel. The street was quiet, the kind of quiet that makes you hear your own heartbeat. For a long time, I told myself the money didn't matter as long as family did. But seeing her there, laughing, loading furniture, carrying more things than most people buy in a year, I realized it wasn't just about the money anymore. It was about what she'd taken from all of us without ever asking. My throat tightened. The windows fogged slightly from my breath. I wiped them clear with my sleeve and kept watching as she tipped the delivery men and waved them off. Then she went inside, closing the door behind her like she was shutting out the world. And that's when it hit me. I was outside my own bloodline. I whispered it without meaning to. I'm outside my own bloodline. The words stung more than I expected. I'd spent my life thinking family meant something you couldn't lose. But there I was, sitting in a car across the street, watching my own son's house like a stranger, like I didn't belong. I don't know how long I sat there. Maybe 10 minutes, maybe 30. The snow had stopped, but the air was cold enough to sting. A few cars passed, neighbors walking dogs or bringing in groceries. I kept my head low. Then I heard a voice from outside my window. Mrs. Marwood? I looked up. It was Mrs. Crawford, their neighbor, a small woman with white hair tucked into a knitted hat. She lived 2 houses down. We'd spoken a few times at family barbecues years ago. She leaned closer to the car and smiled gently. I thought that was you. I forced a small smile. Just passing through, I said. She nodded toward the house. She's been busy today, she said quietly. That woman shops like a senator. It caught me off guard, and for a second I almost laughed. But it wasn't funny. It was confirmation. Mrs. Crawford wasn't gossiping. She was observing. And her tone carried something else too. Suspicion. I glanced back at the house. Jenna's car was in the driveway, the back seat piled with more bags. A new lamp box leaned against the garage wall. Thank you, I said softly. Mrs. Crawford tilted her head. Everything all right, dear? Yes, I lied. It will be. She patted the side of my car. You take care of yourself, Helen. When she walked away, I reached for my phone. My hands trembled, but not from the cold this time. I scrolled to the number I'd written down the night before. Detective Miriam Cole, Financial Crimes Unit, Portland Police Department. I hesitated for just a second, watching the house one last time. Inside, through the window, I saw Jenna walking around, still on her phone, probably telling someone about her new furniture, her busy day, her perfect life. I pressed call. The line clicked twice, and a calm, firm voice answered. Detective Cole. Detective, I said, steadying my voice. My name is Helen Marwood. We spoke briefly with one of your officers last night. I think I have information you'll want to hear, about a woman named Jenna Rowe. There was a pause on the other end, the sound of papers shifting. Go on, Mrs. Marwood, she said. I'm listening. I looked back at the house, the lights glowing warm behind the frosted windows, and felt a strange mix of sadness and certainty. I had no idea what would come next, but for the first time in years, I wasn't going to watch from outside anymore. This time I was stepping back in, not to be loved, not to be accepted, but to protect what was left of my family from the woman who had built her life on lies. Detective Cole didn't waste time. The morning after I called her, she met me in person. We sat in a small office at the downtown police station, pale gray walls, coffee that smelled burned, papers stacked neatly in front of her. She looked like the kind of woman who'd seen too much and stopped being surprised by anything. She started by thanking me for reaching out, then got straight to it. Mrs. Marwood, I can confirm that Jenna Rowe is currently under active investigation. We have reason to believe she's involved in a financial laundering operation connected to several shell accounts in 3 states. I didn't say anything. I just stared at her. Somehow hearing it out loud made my stomach twist. I'd known something was wrong, but part of me had hoped I was mistaken, that it was all paranoia, just a mother's overthinking. Detective Cole slid a file across the desk. We've been monitoring her for months, but we didn't have enough to act. What you've uncovered, the money transfers, your documentation, the timeline, gives us leverage, but we need one last thing. What's that? I asked. She trusts you, the detective said. You're her last open door. We need her to reveal her active accounts, the ones she's been using to hide the funds. And for that, we'll need you to make her believe she's about to receive a large sum of money. I felt my breath catch. You want me to lie to her? Yes, Cole said, but not forever. Just long enough for her to expose herself. We'll record everything. You'll be safe, Mrs. Marwood. You won't be alone for a second. I sat there in silence for a while. The idea of deceiving someone, even Jenna, made me uneasy. But then I remembered the look on Noah's face at Christmas dinner, the way he froze when his mother told him to sit down, the way Sophie had gone quiet after. If this was what it took to protect them, then I could do it. What do I have to say? I asked finally. Cole handed me a sheet of notes. Tell her you've been meeting with a financial advisor and that you want to gift your family an early inheritance, $200,000. Say you need her help with the logistics. Make it sound like it's her idea to handle the transfer herself. $200,000. The number sounded unreal. I'd never seen that much in one place, but Jenna wouldn't know that. To her, it would sound just right. Tempting, believable, irresistible. I nodded slowly. When? Tomorrow, the detective said. We'll set up at the Lighthouse Roastery on Commercial Street. It's quiet, lots of windows, easy to monitor. We'll wire you before you go in. All you have to do is talk. That night I couldn't sleep. I stood in front of my bathroom mirror looking at myself the way I used to before teaching, when I had to face a classroom full of kids who thought art was useless until they learned what it could reveal. I practiced what I would say. I've been thinking about the future. You were right about boundaries, Jenna. I've realized I want to do something final for the family. I want to give you and Lucas an early inheritance, for tax reasons. Every time I said the words, they felt wrong in my mouth. My hands trembled. I gripped the edge of the sink to steady them. I used to teach theater at school, I whispered to the mirror. Tonight I'll perform the hardest role of my life. The next day, everything moved quickly. The police team met me at the cafe an hour before the meeting. They showed me the tiny microphone, a small black clip that looked like part of my cardigan. They tested it, adjusted the volume, and placed a receiver in my coat pocket. Detective Cole stayed calm, professional. You'll be fine, she said. If she asks questions, keep it simple. Let her talk. She'll want to impress you. That's how people like her work. The more she talks, the more she reveals. I nodded, trying not to let the nerves show. The cafe smelled of roasted beans and sugar, soft jazz playing in the background. The morning crowd was thinning, leaving a few quiet tables and the sound of cups clinking against saucers. 2 agents took seats near the back, pretending to be a couple. Another sat by the window, reading a newspaper. It looked ordinary, nothing like the kind of place where someone's life might fall apart. At exactly 2 o'clock, Jenna arrived. Punctual, confident, coat belted tight, hair perfect as always. She spotted me immediately and smiled like nothing had ever happened. Helen, she said brightly, I'm glad you called. I was worried after Christmas. I smiled back, matching her tone. So was I. That's actually why I wanted to meet. We ordered coffee. I could feel the microphone against my collarbone, every beat of my heart loud in my ears. I kept my hands steady around the cup. When we were alone at the table, I leaned forward slightly. I've been thinking a lot about what you said, I began. About letting go, about not interfering. You were right. I've been holding on too tightly. She softened a little, not out of kindness, but out of satisfaction. I appreciate that, Helen. It's not easy, I know. I want to do something good, I said. Something for the family's future. My advisor says it's smart to gift money early to reduce estate taxes. I was thinking $200,000, split between you, Lucas, and the kids. Her smile froze for half a second. Then it returned, wider, brighter. That's very generous, she said carefully. I'll need your help with the logistics, I continued, pretending to fumble with the folder in front of me. I'd like to make sure everything is transferred the right way, into the right accounts. That was it. The bait. Her eyes. Flickered, calculating. Of course, she said. Lucas is terrible with paperwork, so I handle all our finances. I can get you everything you need. Account numbers, balances, routing info. Whatever makes it easier. I smiled softly, pretending relief. That would be wonderful. She reached into her bag, pulled out her tablet, and began typing notes. We can do it in stages, she said. Maybe spread it across a few accounts to keep things simple. Every word she said was being recorded. I could feel the weight of the truth building in the air between us. When she finished, she looked up and placed her hand over mine. This means a lot, Helen. I know things have been tense, but this changes everything. I smiled back. Yes, I said quietly. It does. She didn't know it yet, but it wasn't just her future that was changing. It was mine too. For the first time in years, I wasn't acting out of guilt or love or fear. I was acting out of strength. And as she walked out of that cafe thinking she had won, I sat there watching her go, calm, steady, and finally certain. Tomorrow, the truth would come for her. The day of the meeting was cold and bright, the kind of day where the air stings your cheeks and every breath feels sharp. I got there early, just like Detective Cole asked. The cafe was quiet, morning rush long gone, only the hum of the espresso machine and the soft scrape of spoons against cups. I took the same seat we'd planned, by the window, facing the street. A small microphone was clipped inside my coat, hidden beneath the wool. My hands were steady this time. Not because I wasn't nervous, but because I'd already made peace with what had to happen. When the door opened, the little bell above it chimed. I looked up and saw her, Jenna, walking in like she owned the place. Her coat was white, her lipstick red, her smile polished. She spotted me immediately and waved. "Helen," she said, her voice warm. "Let's forget Christmas, shall we?" She sat down before I could answer, brushing invisible snow from her sleeve. I nodded slowly. That's exactly what I was thinking. For a moment, we just sat there, two women who looked from the outside like family catching up. But underneath the small smiles, there was a quiet current neither of us could ignore. I took a sip of my coffee and began, keeping my voice even. "I've been meeting with my financial advisor," I said, "and I've decided to gift your family some of my savings before tax season." She tilted her head, pretending confusion. "Gift?" "Yes," I said. $200,000. The number hung in the air for a second. She blinked once, then smiled, slow, deliberate. "That's incredibly generous, Helen." I could see the calculation in her eyes, even as she tried to hide it. Her fingers brushed against her cup, tapping softly, a small, unconscious rhythm that gave her away. "I just want to do something good," I continued. "Something that helps you, Lucas, and the kids feel more secure." She leaned in a little, lowering her voice. "You don't have to do that," she said, the words polite, rehearsed. "But if you truly want to, I can make sure it's handled properly." "Of course," I said. "I'll need account details, maybe separate ones for the household funds. I'd like to organize things the right way." Her reaction was instant. She nodded quickly, too quickly. "Yes, that's smart. We have a few accounts, business, household, savings, all managed under different names for tax purposes." I kept my expression blank, like I didn't notice how easily she volunteered the information. She took out her phone and opened a note app, scrolling through. "Let's see," she murmured. "There's Rowe & Co. Consulting. That's our family's small business. Then Blue Haven LLC. We use that for Lucas's side work. And, oh, there's Mosaic Ventures. That's more of a savings vehicle." 3 names, 3 accounts. Exactly what the detectives had been waiting for. I glanced briefly toward the back corner of the cafe. Detective Cole was there, sitting at a small table, pretending to read a newspaper. She didn't look up, but I saw her hand move slightly. A small, confirming nod. Jenna was still talking, her voice smooth and confident. "If you prefer, I can send you all the routing numbers later today. It'll be easier for you to manage through your advisor." "That would be perfect," I said. "Thank you." She reached across the table and touched my hand. "Helen, I know things between us have been strained, but this means a lot, really." I smiled faintly. "I'm glad." For a moment, neither of us spoke. Outside, snow flurries drifted across the street. Inside, the cafe felt warm, too warm. The sound of milk steaming and cups clinking filled the silence between us. Then she stood up, smoothing her coat. "I'll email the details tonight," she said. "And thank you again. This will change everything for our family." I nodded. "Yes," I said softly. "It will." She smiled one last time, turned and walked out. Her heels clicked against the floor, steady and sharp. I watched her cross the street, the white of her coat blending into the snow. When the door shut behind her, I exhaled for the first time in what felt like hours. My whole body felt lighter, but my heart was heavy. Not with fear, but with something closer to grief. Detective Cole approached quietly from behind. "You did great," she said. "We got everything we needed." I didn't turn to her right away. I just watched Jenna's car pull away, her taillights glowing red against the gray street. "For the first time," I said, more to myself than anyone else, "I didn't feel small in her presence." Cole gave me a faint smile. "That's because you aren't." I looked down at my hands still resting on the table, the same hands that had once baked pies, held a child, written checks in blind faith. For years I'd let someone else decide what my worth was. But that day, in that quiet cafe, I'd finally taken it back. And as I stood up and walked out into the cold, I realized something simple but powerful. The truth didn't just belong to the police now, it belonged to me. The call came just after sunrise. My phone buzzed on the kitchen counter while I was pouring my first cup of coffee. For a second, I thought about letting it ring. Then I saw the name, Lucas. I picked up. His voice was shaking. "Mom, they arrested Jenna." I didn't react. I just sat down at the table, the same table where I'd written her name over and over in my notebook. "I know," I said quietly. He hesitated. "You know?" "Yes," I said. I knew it would happen. There was silence on the other end, just his breathing. "They said she's being charged with fraud. They said detectives have been investigating her for months. I didn't know any of this." "I believe you," I said. And I did. For all his blindness, Lucas had never been cruel. Just trusting. Too trusting. "I'm so sorry, Mom," he whispered. "I should have listened. I should have seen it." "Don't," I said gently. "You loved her. That's not something to apologize for." After we hung up, I sat still for a long while, the morning light slowly filling the kitchen. Somewhere across town, a team of officers was standing outside the house I used to visit for Christmas dinners. Detective Cole had promised to update me, but I didn't need details. I could picture it in my mind. The knock on the door, the confusion, the way Jenna's perfect calm would shatter the second she realized the cameras weren't for show. I could almost hear her voice, sharp, frantic. "This is a mistake. You don't understand. My husband's mother, she's lying." But the officers wouldn't listen. They had evidence now, bank statements, account numbers, recordings, her own words. And Detective Miriam Cole, calm, steady as always, would stand there, badge glinting in the light, reading out the charges. Fraud, identity theft, financial manipulation. There would be no yelling after that, just the sound of the cuffs locking. I didn't take any pleasure in imagining it. It wasn't revenge I wanted. It was the truth. Plain, clean, undeniable. And now it was finally out in the open. When my phone rang again, I ignored it. I didn't want to talk anymore. I wanted quiet. I cut myself a slice of the pecan pie that had been sitting in the fridge since Christmas, the one that never got served. I warmed it in the oven until the crust softened, then sat at the table and ate it slowly. The taste was familiar. Sweet, a little nutty, buttery around the edges. The same recipe my mother taught me when I was 16. For years, that pie had been my symbol of family, something I made to bring people together. Now it was just mine again. The kitchen was silent except for the ticking of the clock. The world outside kept moving, cars, voices, sirens faint in the distance. But inside my little house, everything was still. I thought about justice, about how people imagine it comes in big moments. Courtroom, speeches, flashing lights, dramatic confessions. But that's not how it really happens. Justice doesn't come with fireworks. Sometimes it comes quietly, without applause. Sometimes it comes with silence and a slice of a pie. I finished eating, washed the plate, and set it to dry by the sink. The morning sun touched the counter, soft and golden. And for the first time in years, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. It had been a week since Jenna's arrest when Lucas showed up at my door. It was late afternoon, the kind of cold, gray Portland day where the sky sits low and heavy over the rooftops. I was in the kitchen, folding laundry, when I heard the knock. When I opened the door, he was standing there with his hands shoved deep into his coat pockets. His face looked older, thinner, the kind of tired that doesn't come from lack of sleep but from too much regret. "Mom," he said softly. "Come in," I told him. He stepped inside and stood awkwardly near the table. He looked around like he didn't quite recognize the place, even though he'd grown up in this house. After a moment, he said it, the thing that had probably been sitting on his tongue since the day it happened. "I should have seen it." I shook my head. Love makes us blind, not weak. He looked down, eyes glistening. "I don't know how to fix this." I walked over, put my hand on his arm. "Start by coming home for dinner," I said gently. "Just dinner, no performances." For a moment he didn't move. Then he nodded, the smallest of nods, and sank into the nearest chair. He looked exhausted, but also lighter, like the weight he'd been carrying had finally started to loosen. A few minutes later, I heard small footsteps. Sophie peeked in from the doorway. Her hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail, her face pale but curious. "Grandma," she said quietly, "were you scared of Mom?" The question caught me off guard. I thought about lying, about saying something soft and safe. But she deserved the truth. "Yes," I said. "I was scared. But fear isn't shameful, sweetheart. Pretending nothing's wrong is." She stood there for a second, then walked over and leaned against me. I could feel her small heartbeat against my arm. After a while, she looked up and asked, "Can we make pie again? The one Mom didn't let you serve?" I smiled. "Of course we can." We went into the kitchen together. The air smelled like cinnamon again. I pulled the old recipe card from the drawer, the one with my mother's handwriting faded in the corners. Sophie read over my shoulder as I measured out the ingredients. 1 cup of sugar, half a stick of butter. She recited. I added, 1 cup of trust, 2 spoons of truth. She laughed, that quick, bright kind of laugh only a child can make. "That's not real, Grandma." I smiled at her. "It is now." We worked side by side, mixing, pouring, tasting. Lucas sat at the table, watching us, his eyes red but softer than before. Every now and then he'd glance at me like he was seeing something he hadn't in years. When the pie was ready, I slid it into the oven. The smell filled the kitchen almost immediately. Warm, buttery, sweet. Sophie pressed her face close to the glass, watching the crust slowly rise. "The edges are turning golden," she said. "I know." Said, "That's how you know it's ready." The 3 of us stood there for a moment, just watching, not talking. The sound of the ticking clock, the hum of the oven, the faint crackle of the crust baking, all of it felt like something small and sacred. After everything, the shouting, the silence, the lies, it was strange how healing could look like this. Just standing together in a quiet kitchen, watching something simple come back to life. When the timer beeped, I pulled the pie out carefully and set it on the counter. The smell was perfect, the same as it had always been. Sophie leaned on the table, chin in her hands. "Grandma," she said, "can we make it again next week?" "Yes," I said. "Every week if you want." The oven light was still on, glowing softly in the dim kitchen. I looked at it, that small, steady light, and felt something I hadn't in a long time. Hope. The future wasn't going to be perfect. There would still be pain, questions, maybe even distance. But right then, in that warm little kitchen, I could see it. Something whole starting again. The oven hummed, the pie glowed golden through the glass, and I whispered to myself. The oven light came on, and I saw the future rise, golden, warm, and alive, just like the crust of a pie. It was early evening when the sea started to thaw. The snow that had covered the cliffs for weeks was melting now, dripping down in quiet streams that met the gray-blue water below. From my kitchen window, I could see the tide coming in, slow and steady, pushing against the rocks. I sat in my usual chair by the window, a blanket over my knees, and watched the light fade. The air smelled faintly of sugar and butter. On the table beside me sat a fresh pecan pie. The same recipe, the same smell, but everything about it felt different now. The crust was golden, still warm, the scent filling the small house. Sophie had helped me make it that morning, giggling every time flour landed on her nose. When we finished, she insisted on making a card. Now, that card was propped against the pie dish. In her neat, careful handwriting, it said, "To Grandma, for teaching me what's worth keeping." I traced the letters with my finger. For a long time, I just sat there, letting the words settle in. Outside, the sky turned pink, then blue, then that deep color right before dark. The lighthouse beam cut across the horizon, its rhythm slow and certain. I'd watched that light my whole life, as a wife, a teacher, a mother, a grandmother. It had always been there, even when I wasn't sure where I belonged. I took a small slice of pie, just one, and let the warmth spread through me. And as I sat there, I thought about all the years I had given, the dinners, the calls, the quiet sacrifices. I'd always believed that love meant giving without limits, that if you gave enough, people would see your heart and understand it. But I was wrong. Love without boundaries turns into something else, something that drains you until you forget where you end and everyone else begins. I looked down at the pie again, simple, imperfect, mine. I thought about everything that had happened, the lies, the pain, the police, the truth. It all started with a dessert, a forgotten dish in a pantry, a moment so small no one else would have noticed. But that moment had pulled every hidden thread loose until everything false came undone. I smiled to myself, a quiet, tired smile. I used to think love meant giving without condition, I whispered. Now I know love lasts longer when it has limits. And sometimes justice begins with a slice of pie that never got served. The clock ticked softly behind me. Outside, the church bells started to ring, slow, low, steady. The lighthouse lights swept across my window, painting the walls in brief gold. The sound of the waves rose and fell, calm and endless. And for the first time in a long, long time, the world felt still, not empty, just peaceful. The camera of life, if there had been one, would have pulled back slowly, past the pie, past the card, past the window, and out toward the sea. The sound of the bells lingered. The light from the lighthouse moved again, one final sweep across the water. And there, in that small kitchen by the ocean, a grandmother sat quietly, watching the tide, the pie cooling beside her, content finally to let the world be as it is.